Hi guys, today we're starting student handout 1 in our unit on integer operations. We're going to be starting with adding integers with models. So prior to this time in school, you've probably always learned about positive numbers, but integers start to include negative numbers as well. So we're going to start by filling out the top of our handout here. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is that integers are positive or negative whole numbers, and they can be represented with two different types of models or drawings. First, we can use counters, which will be the first thing we talk about, or we can use a number line. So we're going to look at both of these kind of examples today. The first example is modeling with counters. And you'll see down here that we can model integers, positive integers with a plus sign, and negative integers with a minus sign. You're also going to see a zero pair. And what a zero pair entails or means with integers is that if I have a positive number and a negative number and they match up, then they cancel one another out. They don't have any impact on my answer of my addition or subtraction problem. They cancel each other out, so we call them a zero pair. So we're going to take this concept and we're going to start modeling it down below. So it says use the key above to model the values using counters. Number 1 says use 4 counters to show the number 4. So unless it says negative, that means that our counters are positive. And I just like to write 4 plus signs to represent 4 counters. That shows the number 4. Number 2 says use 6 counters to show the number 0. So I need to use this zero pair principle in order to make the answer to this 0. So I know that if I have 3 and 3 of something, if I had one of one negative and one group of positives, then that would equal 0 pairs and they would cancel each other out. So what I like to do is write mine so I have a space to create the 0 pairs next to each other. So I have 3 positives, and in order to get 0 pairs, I have to put negatives. And then what I like to do so I don't get confused is I go back through and I circle the 0 pairs. That way I know that they cancel each other out. If something's left outside of the circle, then I know that that's what I need to count for my answer. Number 3. Use 7 counters to show the number -1. So I know that I'm going to need to have more negatives than positives, and I know that I have to have a total of 7 counters. So I know in my mind that 4 plus 3 is 7. So I need to have more negative counters. So I'm going to use 3 positive counters and 4 negative counters. And then I'm going to circle my 0 pairs. And when I do that, I see that I have 1 negative left. So these are just ways that we can model a adding integers question with counters. So number 4 says to write an equation to represent the value of the model. Then model the given equations. So in this first set, we're going to write an equation. In the second set, we are going to draw the pictures that represent the equation. So you always need to start by counting the first group that you have. And here I have 4 negatives, so I write that as -4. And we're doing addition, so I'm adding to it, and I'm adding 3 positives. So we need to start getting in the habit of solving these. And so with these counters, you're going to circle the pairs, and these get a little funky, which is why I draw mine next to each other. And what I see is that I have -1 left without a buddy. So the answer to -4 plus 3 is -1. Let's look here at number 5. I see I have 2 negatives to start with, so I'm going to write my equation as -2 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. -2 plus 6, and then I'm going to circle my 0 pairs, and I'm left with +4. Now I'm going to look at number 6. I'm going to do it the same way. I have 3 negatives first, so I'm going to write -3 plus counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Negative 3 plus 6 is the equation. I'm going to circle my 0 pairs. And when I do that, I get 3 positives left. You don't need to put a plus sign if it's positive. It's just expected that when there's nothing there, that is a positive. Now we're going to move down to the lower part of our paper, and now we're going to model these equations with the counters. So the first thing I need to draw here are 3 negatives, representing those with minus signs. And then I need to put 4 positives. So I always try and write them next to each other to model, making it easier to create my 0 pairs. And now to solve this, I'm going to circle my 0 pairs. And what I have left is positive 1. So I just write a 1. Let's look at number 8. Number 8, I have 3 positives. I represent that with 3 plus signs. It says plus a negative 4, which we need to get in the habit of putting parentheses around that so we see that that is the value of that integer. So now I'm going to put 4 negatives down. And I'm going to go back and circle my 0 pairs to help me solve my equation. So 3 plus negative 4 equals negative 1. I always have to make sure that I keep that sign with the integer. So if it's a negative, I can't not write that negative. Number 9 is going to look a little bit different. So this says negative 3 plus a negative 4. So I start out by writing 3 negative signs. And we're adding to it another 4 negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I need to count all them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's not 7 positive. I always have to make sure I have minus signs. So it's negative 7. I always have to include my sign when we're talking about integers. So question 10 tells us to look at questions 7 through 9 and talk about the patterns that we notice. So when I'm looking at these, I'm seeing all these little circles. So I notice that when we have a positive counter and a negative counter together, they cancel each other out. So we're going to go ahead and write that. A positive and a negative counter cancel each other out by creating a 0 pair. The other thing I'm noticing is that here I had more positives, and in this one I had more negatives. And whenever that happened, the answer was always the same value as the greater integer. We call this the greater absolute value. And what absolute value means is the number and its distance. How far away from 0 is this number? So when I think about negative 3 and 4, I know that negative 3 is 3 spaces away from 0, and positive 4 would be 4 spaces away from 0. So this positive is more spaces away from 0 than the negative. But if I look at this example, I have 3 plus a negative 4. The absolute value of each of these, if I were thinking about it, 3 is only 3 spaces away from 0, whereas negative 4 is 4 spaces away from 0. In distance or absolute value, that can't be negative. It's just tell how far away it is. So the other thing that I notice is the number with the greater absolute value remember, that means distance away from 0. With a greater absolute value determines the sign of our answer. In this case, it's our sum. So I see there's more negatives, so that means my answer is going to be negative. I see more positives here with the absolute value, so my answer is going to be positive. Whenever it's the same, that sign for our answer, it stays with whatever sign it is for our pairs. Let's turn over to the back and look at number lines now. So another way that we can model integers is by using a number line. And if you look here at this example, it says modeling with a number line, and they give us an equation. They show us that -3 plus 8 equals something, and that's what we're going to be figuring out. So it's kind of a diagram to help you understand what equations with integers look like. So when I'm looking here, when I see a negative sign or I see a positive sign, that's telling me the direction that I'm going to go on my number line. Negative numbers mean that I go to 0 and I'm going to be going left. But if I have a positive sign, that means my direction is going to bring me to the right of 0. The distance just tells me how many spaces I'm going, whether it's left or right. So this might be a little tricky as we get started, but it will get easier as we do a few examples. So first we're going to look at this example. You're going to see 2 lines written on the number line. The first number in our equation is always where we start. So the first thing we're going to do anytime we do a number line is we always start at 0. Every equation starts at 0. So I always just put a dot above 0, and then I look at the integer. In this case, it's -3. A negative number means I'm going to go to the left, and then the 3 tells me how many places. So I'm going to go to -3 with my line, and I draw an arrow. Now, from that spot, I need to go 8 to the right because this is positive. So I like to put a dot above where I'm starting at -3, and now I'm going to draw a line to show me going 8 the other direction. I don't start at 0. I have to start at my other integer. So I'm at -3, and I know I go 3 spaces to get back to 0, and I know that 3 plus 5 is 8, so I'm going to go to spot number 5 on my number line. And so this arrow, the second arrow, tells me that my answer to this question is a +5. So let's look at some more examples. Number 11 says use the number line to model and solve the addition problems below. So they want us to draw it out, but they also want us to write the solution. So when I'm looking at this question, number 11, it says -1 plus 4. I always am going to have 2 lines on my number line. My first integer, I start at 0. And when I look at my first integer, I'm going to be going 1 space. And the negative tells me I'm going to the left 1 space. So I'm just going to draw my arrow to -1. Now before I add 4, I'm going to start a second line. And I know that I'm going to be looking at this right here. It tells me it's positive. That's the value of this 4. The 4 is worth a +4. I'm going to move 4 spaces to the right, and that's going to be my solution. So I go 1 to get to 0, 2, 3, and 4. So that gives me an answer that -1 plus 4 equals 3. Let's look at number 12. Number 12 says 1 plus -4. So again, I'm going to start at 0, which is where we always start when we solve our problems. I'm going to look at the first integer, which is 1. This is in the positive direction, so it means I'm going to go to the right on the number line, 1 space. I'm going to make my arrow, and now I'm starting at +1. I'm going to make my dot to create my second line, and now I'm looking at my second integer of -4. So I need to go 4 to the left with my line. So I go 1 to the left, 2, 3, and 4. This tells me that my answer is going to be -3. So the number line modeling helps you really to see where you are. You just have to make sure and draw your number line out correctly if there's not one already created for you. Let's look at number 13. It's going to be a little bit different. So this says -1 plus -4. So we're going to use the same process. We're going to start at 0. And I see from this integer that I'm going to go to the left because it's negative, and I'm going to go one space to the left. I'm going to put my dot above that -1, and now I'm going to look at my second integer. This says that I'm adding a -4 to it. So I'm going to start at -1, and -4 tells me I'm going to keep going to the left 4 places. So my number line is getting longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that puts me at -5. My answer is -5. So whenever our signs are both negative, that means my answer is going to be negative. I'm getting farther away from 0. Now let's look at 14. 1 plus 4. Again, I'm going to start at 0. And now this tells me that I'm going to be going to the right because this is a positive. 1 spot. I'm going to make my dot above. And then my +4 means I'm going to go to the right again 4 spaces, which is going to equal a +5. So anytime my signs are the same, my line just continues to extend in whatever direction I was going in. When I look at these with different signs, the line goes the opposite direction. They're not facing each other. They're kind of pointing one direction and the other. So when we are talking about some patterns that we notice from these problems above, one pattern is that when the numbers added, we're adding them, have the same sign, then the solution will have that sign. However, when the signs are different, then in fact we just subtract the numbers from each other. 4 minus 1 equals 3. You subtract the numbers. And we keep the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. We keep the sign of the number with the greater absolute value, which means distance away from 0. So now let's look at 16 through 23. 16 through 23 say to use a model of your choice or test the patterns you have discovered to solve questions 16 through 23. So in these, they want us to either draw a number line or use counters to model these addition problems. So I personally feel like the counters are a little bit easier to draw, so I'm going to model those for you. So number 6 says -6 plus 3. So that means I'm going to write 6 negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to pair that up with 3 positive signs. Then I'm going to circle my 0 pairs and see what I have left over. I have 1, 2, 3. I have -3. We can't forget to add our sign. Now let's look at number 17. I'm going to draw 2 plus signs because I have 2 positives, and then I'm going to draw 5 negatives. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to circle these, and my answer is 1, 2, 3, -3. Let's look at number 18. -5 plus a -5. So I'm going to draw 5 negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to add to that 5 more negative signs. And now I'm going to add them all up. I have 3, 6, 9, and 10. But they're negatives, so my answer has to be a negative 10. Let's look at this last example together, and then you're going to do these 4 on your own. Number 19 says negative 1 plus 8. I'm going to write 1 negative, and now I'm going to add 8 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to circle my 0 pairs and then count what I have left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positives. So my answer is a positive 7. Now you go try doing 20 through 23. Pause the video and then come back and check your work. So now you should have had time to do 20 through 23. And now we're going to go through and check and see how you did. Number 20 was 7 plus a negative 5. So I'm going to start out by writing 7 positive signs. And then I'm going to put 5 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I go through and circle all of my 0 pairs and count what's left over. And I have positive 2. Let's look at number 21. We have negative 6 plus 6. So I'm going to write 6 negatives. And then I'm going to write 6 positives. And then I'm going to circle my 0 pairs. And if nothing is left over, then I get 0. Let's check number 22. Negative 7 plus negative 4. So I'm going to draw 7 minus signs. And now I'm going to draw an additional 4 negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to count all of them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And these are all negative, so this is negative 11. Now let's check our last one before you go start your homework. Number 23 says 8 plus negative 10. I start by drawing 8 positive signs. And now I'm going to pair up 10 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Circle my 0 pairs. And what I notice is that I have negative 2 left over. So this is our first introduction to adding integers with models. So that was handout 1. You're going to be putting that into your ISN. Today I want you to complete homework number 1. It says adding integers with models. And you're going to use the same principles that we did on this handout to help you with your homework. So make sure you use the handout to help you with your homework assignment, and then you can bring it to Miss Ellerby to check your work. See you soon.